In Balaman, North Dublin, the streets are quiet in the early hours. Rows of familiar houses sit close together, the kind of place where neighbors know each other, where lights come on and off in predictable patterns, and where very little stays hidden. At one house on Sandy Hill Gardens, though, there was a silence that didn't belong. Inside, Lisa Thompson was dead. Her life had been taken violently, up close and deliberately. There were no screams heard by neighbors, no signs of forced entry, no visible struggle from the outside. Just a woman alone in her home, and a crime scene that would later reveal a brutality that seemed impossible to reconcile with the calm of the street outside. This wasn't random. It wasn't a burglary gone wrong. Whoever killed Lisa was someone she knew, someone she trusted enough to let inside. And once inside, the encounter turned into something far darker than anyone could have imagined. This is the story of Lisa Thompson. She was more than a name in a news report. She was a mother, a sister, a neighbor, who moved through her community quietly, but with purpose. At 52, Lisa's life had been full of ordinary moments, the kind of everyday experiences that make up a lifetime. She had raised 2 children on her own, teaching them independence and resilience. Friends remembered her as quietly determined, someone who faced challenges with pragmatism and grit. Her home was modest, but warm. The living room, where she would ultimately lose her life, had often echoed with her children's laughter. Family photos lined the walls. Birthdays, holidays, snapshots of ordinary days that showed who she was. Private, caring, and protective of the people she let close. In recent years, life hadn't been easy. Like many, Lisa dealt with financial pressures and the daily challenges of raising kids alone. She took on work that brought her into contact with people outside her usual circle. Decisions meant to support her family, but ones that, tragically, put her at risk. Still, she stayed devoted to her children and maintained ties with friends and neighbors who respected her. Those who knew her remember her kindness, her quiet humor, and her ability to make people feel heard. Neighbors spoke of her reliability. If she said she'd do something, she did, and of the dignity she carried in all aspects of life. But beneath the warmth, Lisa carried her own private struggles. She was careful in her dealings with the world, aware it could be unforgiving, but she also opened her door to those she trusted. That trust, central to who she was, would ultimately make her vulnerable. By the spring of 2022, Lisa's life had taken a turn that put her directly in danger. Her interactions with people outside her immediate circle, those she welcomed into her home, were tied to her efforts to support herself and her family, setting the stage for the tragedy that would follow. Early May 2022. Balaman was waking to a quiet spring morning. For most, life followed its usual rhythm. Children heading to school, neighbors going to work, the familiar hum of the city settling into the day. But inside Sandy Hill Gardens, something ordinary was starting to unravel. In the days leading up to her death, Lisa's life was a careful balancing act. She kept her home in order, managed her children's schedules, and tried to maintain a sense of normalcy despite pressures that had quietly built over time. Friends noticed she was more cautious than usual, wary of strangers, but still open to those she trusted. She had been interacting with a man she knew, someone familiar enough to enter her home. Their relationship was complicated, a mix of comfort and tension. On the surface, it seemed harmless, but tragically, it would become central to her final hours. Saturday, May 7, 2022, the last day Lisa was seen alive, began like any other. She made breakfast for her children, exchanged brief words with neighbors, and tended to chores around the house. Her phone, her link to the outside world, would later provide investigators with crucial details about her final interactions. By evening, Lisa was alone in her home. But in the quiet of that living room, danger had already arrived. The next couple of days passed with no word from her. Friends and family grew concerned as calls went unanswered, messages ignored, and routines broken. Lisa, someone so dependable, had suddenly vanished from the rhythm of everyday life. By Tuesday, May 10th, a neighbor's worry escalated into action. They called 999, sensing that something was seriously wrong. What emergency responders found was a scene no one could have expected. Lisa Thompson's body in her own living room, surrounded by the trappings of daily life, yet marked by violence that shattered the calm of her home. Gardaí would later describe it as disturbing but precise, a crime carried out with both brutality and calculation. The front door had been locked from the inside, suggesting no forced entry, while the back door was left open. The bedroom was in disarray, items scattered across the floor, hinting at either a struggle or an attempt to confuse investigators. And in the living room, the heart of her home, the full horror of what had happened became painfully clear. When Gardy arrived at Sandy Hill Gardens, the quiet of the North Dublin street outside stood in stark contrast to the scene inside. Sunlight streamed through the front windows, casting long shadows across the carpet, a home frozen in a moment of violence. The living room, usually warm and full of family life, had become the setting for a deliberate, brutal act. Lisa Thompson's body lay near the center of the room. Her movements during the attack had been frantic, defensive, a desperate attempt to survive. Bruises on her forearms and hands told the story. She had fought back, resisted, struggled, but the force against her was overwhelming. Investigators documented multiple injuries, deep stab wounds to her chest, some piercing vital organs. These weren't random. They were precise, intentional, driven with lethal force. Marks around her neck indicated a cord-like ligature, wrapped tightly, a final attempt to restrain or silence her. The placement suggested she had been caught in a terrifying last struggle. Items were overturned, clothing scattered across the room, evidence of the chaos that had unfolded. Yet there were no signs of a forced break-in. The grim reality was clear. Lisa had likely let her attacker inside. Gardy carefully recorded every detail. Angles of wounds, patterns of blood spatter, positions of objects, small traces, fingerprints, DNA on the cord, and other biological material would later form the first concrete links to the perpetrator. The bedroom, while not the main scene, told a related story. Drawers had been pulled open, personal items displaced. Whether these actions were part of the struggle or an attempt to hide evidence, investigators could not yet say. But it was evident that the violence had affected the entire home. Forensic teams had the difficult task of collecting evidence while respecting the space as a personal, private home. Every corner was photographed, every surface examined, each item cataloged. From a DNA swab on the cord to fingerprints on furniture, the evidence began to reveal a confrontation that was intimate, violent, and devastatingly close. This was not random. It was personal. It was direct. After Lisa Thompson's body was carefully taken from her home, it was brought to the morgue, where forensic pathologists began the painstaking work of piecing together her final moments. Dr. Linda Mulligan, chief state pathologist, conducted a detailed examination. What she found painted a grim but precise picture of what had happened. Lisa's upper torso bore multiple stab wounds, each inflicted with deadly intent. At least 6 had pierced her heart, while others struck her lungs. The placement and depth suggested not only determination, but also a familiarity with the human body. Each blow calculated to cause maximum harm. Around her neck were ligature marks, a second violent attempt to subdue her. A cord, likely taken from a window blind in her home, had been wrapped tightly and knotted, leaving deep impressions. Investigators later collected the cord as key evidence. Bruising on her forearms, hands, and scalp told the story of a struggle. She had fought, resisted, tried to survive. The pathologist concluded that the cause of death was a combination of asphyxia from strangulation and multiple penetrating chest wounds. Toxicology reports added another layer of context. Prescription medications were present in her system, antidepressants, sedatives, and sleep aids, which may have affected her ability to fight back or escape. The forensic team also collected traces of DNA from the cord and from surfaces throughout the living room. Fingerprints, hair, and skin cells were meticulously cataloged, forming the first biological trail that could link a suspect to the scene. The weapon itself was never found in the home, but analysis suggested it was a knife-like implement about 16 centimeters long, with a single sharp edge. The precision and force required to inflict the wounds made it clear this was not a random or accidental attack. It was deliberate, calculated, and personal. The day Lisa Thompson's body was discovered, Gardy acted quickly, aware that every detail mattered in understanding her final hours. Balaman, usually quiet, became the center of a complex investigation. A careful unraveling of movements, evidence, and human behavior that would take weeks to piece together. The first priority was securing the scene. Sandy Hill Gardens was cordoned off, preserving every detail. The living room where Lisa had fought, the bedroom marked by struggle, and the cord used in her strangulation. Every object, drop of blood, and fingerprint was documented, photographed, and collected for forensic analysis. Investigators also turned to witnesses and surveillance. Neighbors were questioned about any unusual activity, visitors, or strangers lingering nearby. CCTV from surrounding streets proved critical. Footage showed a man walking toward Lisa's home on the evening of May 9th. His clothing, posture, and timing would become a key piece of the puzzle. Meanwhile, forensic scientists examined the biological evidence collected at the scene. DNA from the cord, fingerprints on furniture, and other trace material were analyzed and compared to national databases. These findings pointed to a man Lisa had known, someone who had been inside her home in the hours before her death. Gardy also reviewed Lisa's phone records and social contacts. Messages, calls, and timestamps revealed interactions with a man she trusted enough to let into her home. The timeline of these communications lined up with CCTV footage and witness statements, gradually narrowing the focus onto a specific individual. In parallel, forensic experts began reconstructing the crime. Blood patterns, the angles of stab wounds, and the positions of objects in the living room all helped recreate the struggle. It became painfully clear. Lisa had fought with everything she could, pushing, pulling, trying to escape. But the combination of physical force and the element of surprise had been overwhelming. Each piece of evidence, a fingerprint, a strand of DNA, a trace of blood, became a thread connecting the attack to a person. Through careful science, interviews, and digital analysis, Gardy pieced together a chain of events that led to one man, Brian McHugh, someone known to Lisa from the community. His movements, interactions, and the biological evidence ultimately placed him at the scene, making him the prime suspect in the murder. After weeks of careful investigation, Gardy had gathered enough evidence to take action. Every detail, CCTV footage, DNA from the ligature, fingerprints, and witness statements, pointed to one man, 40-year-old Brian McHugh. McHugh was arrested quietly, without incident. Garda handled the process with precision, ensuring both safety and the integrity of the evidence. Lisa's family, devastated by her loss, were kept informed at every step, while the forensic material was secured meticulously to withstand the scrutiny of the courts. At trial, the case against McHugh was built methodically, piece by piece. Forensic evidence was central. DNA from the cord used to strangle Lisa, fingerprints on surfaces in her living room, and traces of her jewelry found in his possession formed a clear chain linking him directly to the crime. CCTV footage supported witness accounts, showing him near Lisa's home on the evening of May 9th, the timing matching her estimated time of death. Digital records, phone calls, messages, and timestamps added context, documenting interactions between Lisa and McHugh that evening, highlighting a relationship that, tragically, had ended in lethal violence. Throughout the trial, Lisa's children and family gave victim impact statements. Their words painted a portrait of Lisa beyond the crime, her warmth, her humor, her quiet strength, and her unwavering devotion to her family. They reminded the court of the life behind the headlines and the profound loss left in her wake. McHugh denied responsibility, but the evidence against him was overwhelming. The jury reviewed a detailed timeline of events, forensic reconstructions, and expert testimony, each element carefully connecting him to the scene and to the act itself. After deliberation, the jury returned a verdict, guilty. The courtroom was heavy with emotion. Justice had been served in the sense that the person responsible was held accountable, but the relief was tempered by the recognition that nothing could undo the trauma or restore the life that had been lost. In March 2025, Dublin's Central Criminal Court sentenced Brian McHugh to life imprisonment, reflecting the severity of the crime. During sentencing, Lisa's family spoke of the void her death had left. A mother, sister, friend, and neighbor, stolen by an act of violence that shook the entire community. For those who knew her, the sentence brought some measure of closure. But the scars, emotional, psychological, and communal, would remain for years to come. Thanks for watching. If you're interested in real investigations, shocking cases, and justice served, please subscribe, leave a comment, and join us as we explore more true crime stories.